So, welcome everybody to, I'm calling it Archiving 101. I'm not sure if Andrew wants me to call it that, but um, so our introduction to archiving with CFUW. So, thank you everyone for joining us. Like I said, I have put everyone on mute just because we are going to go through kind of the presentation itself, the conversation, and then answer the questions that were submitted. But we will be opening up for any questions later on, because we do know that there will be some. I would like to note that this is brought to you on behalf of the Communications Committee, who, through our survey, our membership survey that we did last year, there was a lot of questions that came up about archiving and what to do and how to do it. So I would like to say that the Communications Committee kind of went through the results of that survey, and archiving was obviously a really hot topic. So we wanted to make sure that we were bringing that information to members. So I'm just going to start with a land acknowledgement today, and then I'm going to pass it over to Andrew. So collectively, the members of CFUW respect and honor the traditional territories of our First Peoples across Canada. From time immemorial, Canada has been and is the home of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We reflect on the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge that today these lands continue to be shared territory of First Nations, Inuit, and the Métis. Reconciliation is more than just a word, it is a profound act of coming together to address past wrongs towards Indigenous peoples and move forward in a spirit of mutual respect, understanding, and healing. It involves seeing the truth of history, acknowledging the pain and suffering endured by others, and committing to actions that foster trust and unity. To me, reconciliation is both personal and communal, a journey that calls for introspection, empathy, and collective effort. It is actively building and continually building bridges. So on that note, I will pass it over to Andrew.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak to your group about your archival needs. So my name is Andrew Chernovich. I'm archivist at the Galt Museum and Archives based in Lethbridge, Alberta. And I'm part of regional archives. And we regularly deal with the records of local nonprofit organizations that are similar to yours. Some of them autonomous clubs that are part of national network, spread out the country. I don't know, like Rotary clubs, like Knights of Columbus, and many other organizations. And of course, we have our own CFUW club in Lethbridge, and we've established a close relationship over the years with them. So we hosted them on multiple occasions, gave them tour, consulted, or they consulted with us, and so on. So this kind of inquiry and sharing of expertise is not new, and I'm very happy to be useful. So what I propose to do is to give you first an overview of how archives work in general, particularly with the connection with the community groups. And I will outline some broad strategies for collaboration and best practices. And then I will go directly to the questions that you submitted and address all of them. And then we'll have time for additional questions and discussion at the end. Okay, so public archives in Canada are found in all shapes and sizes. Their mission is to collect and preserve records of historical importance, and also to make those records available to the public. All archives have their own geographical mandate. So meaning that there is a certain geographical area where those archives are concerned with, and from which they collect their material. Some archives do specialize in subject matter. For example, there are literary archives, for example, or architectural archives. But most of that, they collect all kind of community records from that specific geographical area. So, for example, National Archives, or in Canada, that's the Library and Archives Canada, holds federal records and non-government records of national significance. And that's the biggest archives in the country. Then every province has its own main archives, provincial archives. They hold records of provincial government and the records from the community at large. And then we have regional archives like ours. So in our case, that's not just the city of Lethbridge, but also the whole region of Southwest Alberta. And also on the local level, there are some small local museums that do have archives records, but they are not set up as archives. They don't have a specialized facility, they don't have specialists, and they very often they need support themselves. So um, in in your case, if you considering transferring records, it would be regional archives, provincial, or maybe the national archives. Uh, so records from community groups, they are often kind of categorized as private records, which means non-government records, consist of variety of administrative papers generated by organization. And your organization is not different from that. So you, in terms of the records, you have agendas, minutes, financial records, correspondence, reports, etc. And also occasionally photographs, other audiovisual records, maybe publications, event posters, and more. They are mostly held together as one archival collection, like archival phone. Well, in our case, that would be CFUW Club, Lethbridge and District. And they are preserved in their original order. And I might come back to that to explain more. So a community organization or a club like yours should have a strategy for preserving its records because it's useful for the organization itself, and it's also has significance for the society at large as documentary heritage. So normally how it works, just giving you the larger picture, an organization usually has active records, semi-active records, and archives. So active records are normally kept in the office for current use. Semi-active records are kept in a separate facility and consulted from time to time as needed. They're not as used as active records, and just occasionally for administrative or legal reasons they are retrieved. And archives are selected records kept for their long-term historical value, and usually they are found in the public archive. So an organization can have its own corporate archives, and like theoretically, your national office might have its own archives, or the organization might transfer records in the public archives. So owning its own corporate archives means it has certain advantages. It means complete control over the records, immediate access, and selective access for researchers. Sometimes private corporate archives they have that advantage. They might um, pick and choose the researchers they want to give access to. But the disadvantage, it's very expensive because you spend money on facility, on stuff, supplies. Chances are most organization cannot afford its own facility. And from this point of view, public archives donation is much more practical and perhaps the only viable choice actually for a small organization. And the alternative is just storage of boxes in members' homes and putting them in the risk because you can lose them eventually through neglect or damage. So that's not a real alternative, in fact. So for public archives, if it's transferred to a public archives, it's its mission to preserve, process, and provide access to those records. So what are downsides of having records in the public archives? Because it sounds good. You don't have to spend money. It's pretty convenient. So one of those things that processing times can be long. So when an archives take on a new donation, especially a sizable one from a community organization, it usually takes some time to get those records processed in archival terminology. The process called arrangement description. It's a quite labor intensive process, and very often, even with the larger archives, even like provincial archives, the resources might be limited, and that kind of new donation might wait years to be processed and be accessible and ready for researchers. That's not an exception, that's rather a rule. It takes a long time, it takes years. So that's one potential drawback. Um, I know that some archives make special arrangements sometimes with their donating organization to expedite the process. And that's usually happens when the organization provides either volunteers to help process the collection or funds to hire a researcher. In this case, it can be done much faster, expedited. Uh, but again, you have to provide additional resources. So long processing times, then access can be a bit of an issue in terms of speed. So if the archives that you are donating the records to is located in a different city, so it creates a little bit of barrier for visiting in person. Um, then there are reproduction fees. So if you want to, once you transfer records to the archives, it becomes their property, and also uh, the fees are will be applicable like with accessing any other collection. And also that's the second one, and the third one is you can have no control over access once you donate those records. So that's the mission of a public archives, to be open to the public, so that any researcher from within the country or beyond can access those records and make use of them for whatever purposes they are needed. Um, so the good news is some of those issues that I've just mentioned can be negotiated at the time of donation. For example, temporary restrictions can be introduced on certain records for access to certain records, and might be fee waivers for donors. Like, for example, we at the Galt Museum and Archives, we use that um, rule that if you, a donor organization, donate records to the archives, and later the representatives of the organization members want to use that archives and want to copy uh, some papers, some records, we don't charge them for that. So we provide it for free. That's kind of like an benefit, a benefit for donating the records to the archives, so that there are no kind of financial barriers to for the organization to use their own archives in the future. Okay, now that's all the things that I wanted to kind of outline in terms of the archives in general. I might have missed something, but please do ask at the end among the questions. So right now I will just go and focus on the questions that you post uh, in your survey. So there was a question, there were multiple questions about storage. So I will try briefly addressing that subject. So if you keep your records on site, um, I'm not sure if the individual clubs have their offices. Probably not. Probably they do some events at some rented space, maybe from homes. Um, so in this case, it's even more difficult. So there is no site per se. So it will be somebody's home. So if you keep them in your like private custody for the time being, you should keep certain precautions. First, keep those records organized and labeled and inventoried, uh, and have a system to that. So usually there are some system established by the maybe in the bylaws, or maybe dictated by the secretary of your club. So those guidelines should be followed. And in terms of the storage, like physical storage, keep the boxes away from hazardous conditions. That means away from basement floors for obvious reasons because of the floods, and away from areas with high fluctuations of temperature and humidity, because that constant work of like a temperature and humidity changes, like temperature goes up and down all the time, humidity goes up and down, that gradually harms the records and shorten their lifespan. So you want to avoid the areas where there is high fluctuation of temperature and humidity. Also away from chemical fumes, and away from unauthorized access area. So what I mean by that, they should be they should be locked away, so there is no unauthorized access, and they should not be stored in some kind of like hallway, especially unlabeled, because what often happens if, I don't know, your way, suddenly there are some changes, somebody needs space in a room or that hallway, and suddenly those boxes are thrown away because it's just all junk. So we don't want that to happen. So some precautions should be taken. So another questions, we've just submitted all our archived materials to the Simcoe County Archives. We store current year's information on Google Drive and have a document that suggests items that need to be archived. So overall, this sounds like a good strategy. We often advise donating, well, at the Gold Archives, we advise donating records that are over 10 years old and then making follow-up donations over the years, like, for example, every 5 years, like on a schedule. And this way you don't have to keep all the records in the office or home, because if your organization is old, you might have accumulated a lot of those boxes and they take space. Um, and have your most recent records because they will be used most often. So the so-called those active records that I mentioned before, they can be kept on site in the office, readily available. So duplicating electronic records and printouts is usually a good practice. For archives, actually, it's easier to keep paper copies. So why is that? Because the digital records have their own issues, and we have to take care of the format, migration, digital preservation, and all the other things that are kind of inherent in the digital records. Did Yeah, preserving digital records, not just copying them on the drive and just keeping them there. It's a process, and it's easier. It's easier with paper. Plus, printouts are often more complete copies because the printouts, the paper actually contains signatures and like notes sometimes and so on and so on. So that's there's often a bit different from the digital copies that were produced. So just keep that in mind. Um, Then another question. Clubs are asking about how to best archive electronically. If this webinar for paper or digital archiving. So this webinar is mostly for analog or paper archiving. And my experience is mostly with analog paper records, and that's the majority of the records that we have in the archives. Some records are digitized, so scanned, so preserved digital copy as well, but we don't have a specialized system like they have platforms like Preservica for digital preservation. So we are not that sophisticated and in terms of digital preservation. Um, because yeah, digital preservation, different ball game, as I mentioned. You need to migrate those digital records into the newer formats. You have to keep multiple copies on different carriers. You have to check the files for regularly for corruption. You have to follow security protocols. So all of this requires specialized knowledge, technical skills, special software, and also digital storage space. So it could be more complicated than managing paper. And it certainly, I think it requires its own webinar. So in the future, you might want to request a special webinar on digital preservation. Now, another question, uh, what old materials to keep, where to keep, and what and how to save currently for the future, paper-based or digital records, and what format. Selection is an important issue. And there is some nuance to it. There are not everything should be saved. There are some records that are less valuable, and they are called transitory records. And just to give you some examples of those, they are, for example, bank statements, checks, utility bills, office supplies, purchases, receipts, and invoices. So those kind of um, uh, documents, they very often, like, they accumulated over years, and they can be very bulky. Just like boxes can be filled with just bank statements. So those transitory records, usually they don't go, like when you donate the records to the archives, usually they don't go there, or they get separated in the archives and disposed of. And they should be disposed of because they don't have a lot of historical value. They mostly have administrative value at the moment, probably that year, next year, but after that, their value is very much diminished. Also, um, you and also, I should say that the key information in those lower level financial records is usually kept at the higher level financial records, like the financial reports, the audited financial reports, and so on. So at the higher level, that information is preserved. And those lower level records can be disposed of. Also, you about the duplicates, you can keep multiple copies of your publications, like brochures, flyers, but if you're donating them later to the archives, just include 1 or 2 copies only. So yeah, that's kind of the general principle to, like, what to keep, what not to keep in the selection. Um, it's Yeah, just a second. Mm, mm, Just a second. Okay, I thought there was a message over there. Uh, it's best to keep the original paper documents and digital copies. For digital copies, converting them to fixed formats like TIFF, PDF is the most efficient way to preserve with integrity. Photos can be kept in the original format. TIFF is the best, but essentially you want to keep them in a lossless format. Another question: what information should our club prioritize, save, and how to do so most efficiently? Um, Prioritize records that reflect your core functions as an organization, as a club. Think of your main projects and all the records that you produce related to those projects. And then think about the records that document your stuff, um, uh, financial performance, annual reports, meeting minutes, newsletters, correspondence, those kind of things. Email correspondence can be printed out, or it can be exported using various systems. So essentially, you can have it as a paper file or as electronic files. So for efficiency, have a good records management system. Another question: best method to digitize our archives and make them available to members. So archives normally don't attempt to digitize everything they receive. It's usually very selective and on-demand digitization. To facilitate, to enable the researchers to find materials in the archives, we create special finding aid or descriptions, and we post them in our online database. So essentially, when you're searching the inside of our archives, you're searching the descriptions rather than like the inside of the documents, and that's typical for any archives. Once the researcher located the relevant materials, they can scan those materials using, in our case, our on-site scanners. We also allow researchers to bring their own devices, either scanners, so they can use their digital cameras and yeah, take copies of whatever they need. Um, so you you might want to establish the same kind of system for duplication in your own on-site archives, so like, well, in your office, or um, so essentially is it's probably more practical to run this on-demand kind of system rather than try to digitize it all, because it takes a lot of resources, it will take a lot of time, and essentially might not be necessary. Yeah, so that's more practical to go this way. Okay, another question. I will just quote the UWC North York is 74 years old and have a long list of materials to archive. So huge paper files spread between old files housed at York University and boxes in a basement. Access issues: the executive have 14 years of cloud files for convenience. So in this case, I would be concerned with those materials in the basement. First, because there is always a potential flood damage, and also security and overall control. If multiple members have access to files, it can create situation of no accountability. So if multiple people can just come and retrieve things and uh, keep things at home for a while, of course, and refile them. If they bring them back, they refile them in the wrong places. And at the end, like, nobody knows where things have gone. Nobody can find things. So it's better system if only one person, either designated as archivist, or maybe this function will belong to the secretary or somebody else. So only one person should have access to those records, and no one is allowed to take the originals out of the building. So that would be good practice, and it would be much less messy. Uh, Another question or comment, we have a 92-year-old historian who is keeping us honest about our archives, but this will not last. Yes, that's a very typical situation for many organizations. It is a good practice to have another member serving as assistant and successor in this role, and kind of absorbing the knowledge of that um, member, and also maybe as a uh, good practice for the future, consider donating in this situation to local archives sooner than later, with the help of that very knowledgeable 90-year-old member. Another question, what should not be archived? Currently in the archives, there is a lot of personal information, for example, member addresses. What are the privacy considerations we need to be aware of? Um, yes, so one should certainly be aware of records containing personal information, and uh, you either so you have several choices. You can just not select those records, sensitive records, for donation, or negotiate restricting those individual files for 20, 30 years, and just looking like specifically what kind of information is there. And I will come back to that that was another question as well. There is a learning curve for archivists to find out who has club information and then spread awareness of archives to these people and the general membership, and then ensure we can retrieve their information. So I believe in this case, we are talking about copies of records being in possession of executive members, past and present. Some of them naturally would have duplicates, like of some records, like agendas and minutes. But some of those records can be unique files, never actually submitted to the organization. They just store it in their homes. Um, the board should make a rule for submitting all files when an executive completes its term, and secretary should control what happens. Uh, for the um, for the past records, there should be some kind of general call to all board executive past members to check their files at home if there are records related to the club's activity, to club's business. They should be encouraged to bring them to the office, and then they should be archived. How much is of value? Photos, metadata. Yes, photos are important and should be preserved as well. And this includes, first of all, photo and video documentation of core functions of the organization. I mean, events, everyday work, social functions, portraits, etc. And it's better to preserve both original negatives, if available, and prints. Sometimes they are in the form of slides as well. Albums are often probably the most efficient way to organize the images and keep them supplied with information in the form of captions. Um, for prints, the descriptions they should be accompanied with descriptions describing who is on the picture, what is going on, what kind of event, when it was taking place, and where. So that's the basic information. If there is more information, you can include also more information, but those are the basic information. And sometimes it's possible in the albums to just to put it all in the caption, same page. But if those are loose prints, the best practice would be to write that information on the back of the print with a pencil. And because if you use ink, it might bleed through and damage the picture. So the using pencil is the most safe way. Yeah, and that ensures that the information will be forever attached to that. It will not get separated and get lost. For digital files, this information can be entered into in database. If you use a database, you create the item descriptions for each photograph, so you can enter this information over there. And or for the file itself, you can enter it into the metadata fields with each file. You've probably seen it before. If you have a image file, you can right click on it and just go into properties, and there is a detail kind of column over there, and that's where you can enter the information about that, and it will be saved as part of the file. So that's another way. How to present photos, particularly ones from decades past, where we have only prints but not the original versions. Um, the the originals in most cases are the negatives, but it can be more complicated than that, depending on how the photos were produced, whether they were commissioned, like photo studios, or produced as part of doing business, or private documentation and so on. So it would be somewhat different. So right now we are getting into the realm of copyright, and this in itself could be a subject of a separate webinar. And if you interested in that, I can recommend an expert on copyright. So in general, copyright stays with the creator unless it is transferred to another individual or an entity, or the archives. So usually when the records are donated to an archives and there is a donation agreement, that donation agreement usually stipulates the transfer of rights as well. How to save digitally born material and in which format and which programs drives. Well, I would like to say that I'm right away that I'm not an expert in digital records. If you need guidance or special webinar on that, I can recommend a digital archivist for you. But in general, for born digital documents, most of them are produced in Word, um, format. It's a good practice to save and preserve them in PDF-A format. And so it's usually like PDF/A, and A, I believe, stands for archival, compared to a regular PDF fixed format. PDF-A has a better longevity because it's more self-sufficient. The format itself is more self-sufficient. So, for example, all the fonts inside the document are embedded. There is no encryption. The format adheres strictly to the international standards, this ISO standards, and the format also ensures the accurate visual rendering of the documents, even if it opened much later. And yeah, like when the computers are different, formats are different, and so on, so it will look the same as original. So same format, PDF-A should be, well, could be used for visual presentations like PowerPoint files. You can get, if you want to research it, learn more, you can research that PDF-A format. For other records, spreadsheets are best preserved in the CSV format. For photos, TIFF is the best. For audio, WAV, and for video, MOV. So those are all the so-called lossless formats, so they don't compress your files and throw out some information, and that's important. And they are all universal and not proprietary. Okay, what else? Privacy concerns, especially digital, and how to safeguard against identity theft, etc. So, for privacy, is private organization, like non-government, non-public organization, you are subject to privacy law, and on federal level, it's PIPEDA or PIPEDA, PIPEDA. When you collect personal information from members or non-members, you are responsible for protecting this personal information. And so we're talking about like any information that is about an identified person. So we're talking name, age, ID numbers, home address, email, phone number, employment records, health, financial, or educational details, and also opinion and evaluations on the person. So that's what includes in that personal information kind of range. So the club is responsible for things like articulating the purpose for collecting the information, consent, safeguards, etc. And you can research that about your obligations, and that's probably the job of your secretaries, researching the PPDA and knowing the requirements and ensuring compliance. Again, you might want a separate webinar on that. And again, I can probably recommend a specialist on that. How to differentiate between archiving and turning into a club secretary for all data. Yeah, I'm not sure how it's usually the roles are distributed in the clubs, but actually it's probably the best if the long-term preservation and transfer is controlled by secretary. It's easier to control records from the time of their creation and use, establishing some ground rules, such as naming conventions, for example, then try to do it kind of to systematize it later. And this is something that a secretary can do with the approval of the board. Well, basically, this is records management. And again, can be a separate training opportunity. How to advocate for libraries, municipal and or provincial archives to take materials. So what I would recommend is starting conversations with the private records archivist in your institution, regional or provincial archives. Also, like, remember, you have a choice. I'm not sure like how the relationship works from the individual clubs with the national office, whether there are certain rules where the individual clubs can deposit their records. But if the individual clubs have their autonomy, that means they can choose basically the repository for to whom they can offer their records, and usually it's within their area, like regional archives, maybe provincial archives. So the first thinking, like, what would be the first choice, whether it's the regional archives or provincial archives. Maybe there is some relationship, previous relationship, maybe there are some advantages. So first choosing, like, first choice, second choice, and so on, and go and start a conversation um, with the archivist over there. And you should be prepared to convince them that your club has left a significant legacy in the community. So you're an important organization, and you have quality records to support that claim. So you have good records in your possession you can transfer. So your offer, your donation should be relatively compact. It's better to have it relatively compact because archives have limited space. So to make sure that it's a good size, you can do something about that right away. You can remove all the duplicates, and you can remove all the transitory records to reduce the bulk. Also, avoid donating records offering records in poor condition. Like, for example, some of the records might be water damaged, or they might be moldy, or some present that kind of like hazard. So if that's the case, you might get turned down because of that. So because it might be too costly to restore the records, and the archives will just not go for that. You can also, in this line of persuading the archive to take the records, you might also boost your case by having letters of support, especially from local dignitaries or MLAs. So make it difficult for them to turn you down. Another question, is Atom or access to memory endorsed by CFUW? Does CFUW have a digital platform for archival information, and if there are any financial support? So ICA Atom is a reputable open source platform that I've known of for many years. I haven't used it, but I know about it. It has a fairly long track record. And a lot of archives and cultural institutions use this platform, and I would not be surprised if the CFUW endorses it. I think it would be a good choice. It also the Atom also has a digital preservation component to it. One thing to note is while the platform itself is free, it's an open source platform. The cost comes from the maintenance and support. So just keep that in mind. Yes, it is free, but there are some costs. It's probably more efficient to have a platform like Atom or similar for the whole CFUW national, with a number of licenses for individual clubs. This is not just because of the cost, but also it creates consistency throughout. And that's all the questions that I wanted to go through before we have question and answer period. So yeah, I've seen there are some popping up, some questions in the chat, so I will just go and check them. So there is one from Wendy Johnson. University archives may also be good fit to give the originals, recruitment history in the clubs, financial support for the university. Yeah, actually, yes, naturally. And for some reason, I forgot to mention the that category of archives. So yeah, university archives usually university, medium sized or large university has their own archival, uh, either archives or archival kind of section, and they might be open to accepting records. Usually they are limited in their mandate to something that is like you're related to the university, meaning to the student union body, faculty, and things like that, something like campus related. But if there are enough connections to the university, they might be open to that. So that's an excellent suggestion. So yeah, you in some cases they can be considered as repositories. Uh, Another question from Sandra. We have been turned down by the universities in Quebec, citing no space. Yes, that can be. So, as you have the freedom to offer your records to multiple institutions, they have the freedom of turning you down for various reasons, and one of them is can be a lack of space. And so that's why I mentioned that suggestions about how to make your donations more smaller, eliminating duplicates, eliminating the transitory records, and so that would make it more workable and more likely to be accepted. Yeah, so yeah, or maybe there were some other reasons for them, but it was not articulated. Sometimes if you talk to them, like follow up and talk to them, you might learn those reasons, but who knows. From Wendy Johnson, interesting, our Fredericton, New Brunswick club has a phone collection at the UNB archives. Yep, wonderful. So it's if you already donated the records to an institution like the university archives, you might want in the future to make them priority to the follow-up donations, because you want to keep all your papers ideally in one place. So once you've something been accepted somewhere, like that would be your first place to put the follow-up donations. Access to memory is what is being spoken about. Yes, Adam, it's kind of like an acronym, AT, ATOM, Open Source Archival Access to Memory. That's the one that we're talking about. From Lisa, SFUW Ottawa, holds our collection in a women's collection at the University of Ottawa Archives. Yep, wonderful place to have the records. Um, Usually, the if it's in the provincial or national archives, Library and Archives Canada, it has more of a profile and more visibility than university archives. But for university archives, they have their own research community. So if you want uh, your archives located among the, like, say, students researching history, uh, then it's a good place for your records. So any other questions? I've gone through all of them in the chat box. So maybe you have some maybe Jamie wants to facilitate
I can,
that.
yep, I can coordinate that. That's not a problem. If you have more questions, just put them in the chat, or you can put your hand up and we can unmute you to ask a specific question.
Yeah, I see another one popping up in the. So thank you for the input, as I can now go back to the universities with evidence of importance and accepting our files based on practices. So in this case, yeah, you can do some like informal conversations about the best way um, uh, to to make the offer or resubmit the offer. And also you might want to get in touch with the faculty members that you know who can, like, especially like from history department or so on, that can provide kind of support of the importance. And also with them being a faculty, that also creates that kind of additional weight for that offer. From Marianne, is it necessary for archive monthly agendas, minutes, and executive reports, or just the annual records? No, it's better to have the older uh, meetings with their agendas, minutes, and executive. Because what happens in the annual reports, the information gets summarized, and you want to keep both the annual reports and individual meetings so that you preserve that the richness of the information, and so you have the level of detail for later years, even for administrative use. If you were researching how that project came to be, you can go back to the minutes and see who proposed that, how it was discussed, what was the original design, how it changed later, and so on. And yeah, annual reports are great, but they contain like more general information compared to the meeting minutes, for example. Another question from Patricia: for records deposited to university archives, Acadia, should club retain copyright? Hmm. Well, generally, it's easier to get the records transferred and accepted by the archives if you transfer copyright. Because if you don't, then they are kind of restricted about like with if they in possession of those records, the researchers come and want the copy and use that information, well, some materials for publication, let's say. And in this case, if you own archives, you cannot give them permission. You say, oh, you go to the original club and so on. That becomes a long bureaucratic process and kind of like a pain in the neck for to administer. As an archives, you want to have the copyright so you can give the permission right away and make that process easy and for you and for the researchers. So so think about, like, if you want to keep the copyright, why do you want to keep the copyright? Because if you want the credit for the club, you can always get the credit because you should be acknowledged. But that's not copyright. That's a bit separate. You will always be acknowledged. But yeah, to do a lot of copyright is actually about money, and for the and the money matters more in the like art, high-end photography, literary works, and so on. So in this case, there's not that much kind of like money issues. Um, uh, Times have changed, and many of our members are concerned with privacy potential to have identity theft. How do we protect our members when most of our records have names, emails, phone numbers, and especially past records have addresses? Uh, yeah, okay. So, identity theft, my feeling, theoretically, yes, it can be, but I think it has been over exaggerated. The potential for identity theft based on archival records. Um, it's a lot of that happens, well, because of the financial reason based on the online information like names associated with credit cards that are stored by vendors online and then can be downloaded, sold, and so on. And then potentially somebody can create some kind of identity fraud based on that. On archives, when you're actually going to the archives, going through the records, like potentially copying some information created, like that doesn't really happen often. Theoretically, yes, but um, so in terms of protecting members, so the biggest kind of like the most sensitive type of records, that's the membership lists that would have members, addresses, like separate, like it's a spreadsheet. So those you might want to either not donate them at all or restrict them. So if you make an offer, like say the university archives, you express this concern. Yeah, there is some personal information in those files, like the membership lists. Those things we want to take those membership lists, put them in one file, and restrict that file for, say, 30 years. And that might be acceptable to the archives because archives don't want to accept records, most of which will be restricted. Because why would we keep them like nobody can use them? So that can be a reason for refusal. Because restricted records are not used by anybody, they're useless, essentially. So the archives, because of their reason, they want everything open, but you want to protect the members, the personal information, because that's your responsibility. So you can negotiate that. So one way out how you can compromise is donate the records, but restrict them, certain files, for a number of years. And then after that term expires, they become open, but in 30 years. And most of the individuals are dead by that point, and so it becomes less sensitive. So that's kind of the way to address that. Um, Another question from Lisa. I find it useful to attend all board meetings via Zoom as a non-voting advisor, so I know what records are being generated and I understand the workings of the club. Um, yeah, yeah, that's the way to kind of stay involved. But yeah, a question directed to CFUW. Do we have best practices, protocols, guidelines, naming conventions, recommended methods of digital PDF, ATIF, paper preservation that can be sent to the clubs to assist the archives or records managers? And what what the estimated cost to store digital information security protection? Yes, I think that's a excellent idea to discuss, to have some common standards and recommendations. And yeah, and also have the same for digital preservation. Yeah, that would be a useful thing, I think. Should membership lists be archived? I don't see the value in archiving that information. Uh, they have some historical value long term, but it's not huge. They are probably less useful for historians, researchers in the future than, let's say, the the meeting minutes. At the same time, if we're talking addresses from like years ago, some of that information has been available through local directories. If we have a certain member who lived in the community, like in Lethbridge, you can look up that person's name in the local Lethbridge Henderson directories, and you can find, I think it's up to year 2000. So you can look up the member in the 90s by the last name. You can see the full name. You can see the name of the spouse. You can see the address. You can see where the person worked and in what position. It would say kind of clerk, Safeway. You can see whether the person was a rented or homeowner. And so on. Like you get tons of personal information in our city directories pre-2000. So sometimes you can argue like, yeah, like it's some of the information is out there published in the book, so it's out there anyway. Sometimes you can make that argument that the uh, membership list from the 90s, it's actually you can include that you're not disclosing anything new. Okay, back to the questions.
I think
Uh,
the rest are comments. Or comments on questions that were previously asked. So I think we're okay there.
yeah.
And then one of them was from myself, was just saying
Oh yeah.
specifically, CFUW National doesn't have anything on archiving at the moment. I know there was stuff done probably well over a decade ago. So I did mention that that is something that National and the Communications Committee will look into to see what we can do there to help out. Um, yeah. I think that was
Mhm.
it question wise. If anybody else has any other questions,
Yeah.
oh,
Maybe in person you want to ask like was just speaking, not putting it. Maybe for some people it's just difficult to type in the chat. They would rather raise their hand and ask questions. Yeah, I see one person over there.
Yeah, I have a little pamphlet that was produced by Canadian Federation of University Women's. It's called Handbook for Club Archivists, but
Oh,
it
fantastic.
dates back to 1978.
Wow, 78. Well, I
78.
think it will
So
still be relevant for paper records.
well, this is it. When I took over the archives, I did work in archives for over 20 years at Canadian Pacific. So it was the automatic that when I joined the club,
Mm-hmm.
it got put to me, and this was in it. So
Yeah, no, fantastic.
it tells you exactly what records and everything else. So if Jamie, if you want me to send you the digital file of it, I will, and you can pass it on.
Yeah, that can be a
absolutely, that'd be
basis
wonderful.
for your more updated guidelines, because as I said, the recommendations in that document for paper records would probably be relevant today. It's just you have to add the digital records.
Right. Exactly. There's nothing there. It stops at paper records and whatnot
Yeah,
because we didn't have digital records back in 78.
yeah, fantastic, Joanne. Thank you for bringing this up.
You're
So
welcome.
last thing on here. Oh, Heather has her hand up. Sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering, because the National Office had an archivist work on the national records, did she not establish some standards that could be applied to the clubs?
Yeah.
So those, oh,
Hang
sorry,
on.
go ahead.
No, no. Well, hello,
Let
Heather.
Jamie, hi, hi,
Nice to
Andrew.
see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
But I'm
So,
wondering if Jamie could answer that question.
yeah, Jamie, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so we had a library and archive student last summer. And yes, she started putting items into place for record management and items like that. But we were actually following the National Archives Library rules or guidelines because we were sending our collection there specifically. So her research didn't expand outside of that, outside of the realms of the guidelines specifically for the National Archives Library. So we don't have anything specifically that we would be able to put together. There's smaller items like naming conventions and things like that. So we would be able to put all that information together in kind of a more robust archiving document. So there's little bits and pieces there, Heather, that we can use, yes, and reuse, but nothing, not enough. We'd have to add to it for sure.
Yeah, just to add, like if you transfer your records to any archives, well, including the Library and Archives Canada, they will impose their own kind of rules. So they will collect those records and they would treat them according to their archival rules and principles. Yeah, it's pretty much will be kind of imposed those rules, and they can, for future follow-up donations, they might come up with the recommendations to keep in mind, but essentially they control it. There are some things in the chat as well. Just a second. So in the early years, our records didn't record first names of married women. Yes, that would be a problem. Yeah, it's a good point, and sometimes it's very difficult to recover them. It's possible in many cases, but it requires additional research. I feel membership lists are important as women are historically overlooked, and we have had very influential women in the community that has been overlooked. Yeah, well, ideally, yes. So you can just well, I've seen membership lists of organizations just donated to us, just without like any second thought, and we have to on our end to think whether we put restrictions on them or somehow manage it, like see how sensitive the information is. Yeah, so sometimes they can be open, and sometimes you can justify it, like I just said about the directories from the 90s. They would have all that information, so what's the reason not to restrict that, because if it's already open. So sometimes you can use this kind of justifications for not to restrict things and just have them available for researchers and preserve that kind of historical information about women. Will this Zoom video be available when ready to see? Great session. Yeah, I assume it is. It is recorded and it will be made available as a recording. Are funds available, and how do we ask funds to be able to have a student? I'm not sure I can answer that. And in the
I can
event,
probably answer that one. Sorry. So we don't have funds available at the national level. And we actually, it wasn't funds for a student. We actually went through library and archives at Algonquin College. So we were reached out to by the program itself for them to do an internship with us. So that's how we were able to get a student last year and then into the summer. So if you do have colleges and universities with those programs, they tend to have students that need to do some archiving projects to get their hours in. So that was how we were able to do that at national.
And Jamie, I think the next question is for you about the potential data breach. So how would you handle that?
Yeah, so I'll just say I answer that one briefly. So we have SharePoint. So we use SharePoint and we have our own server. We also have an IT provider that does daily backup checks as well. So if we do ever have a breach, we also have what's it called? Like a quarantine for our emails as well. So if anything ever comes in and is flagged, so our SharePoint is pretty locked down, pretty tight, because it is on its own server. But if there is any breach ever, we are immediately contacted by KCI Networks to be able to look into it. And our auditor also has, because auditing in Canada has now switched obviously to better security controls with information. So we have to do like a tech audit every year with our financial audit as well. So we tend to hopefully be well secure when it comes to, but the 100 years worth of information we've got at national. So I think we're all right.
Yeah,
But,
and I think for archival records, because they are not digitized, it's not possible to have the data breach like online with the archival records. To have access to them, you have to either be on site and access them like in person, or have the assistance from the person who have access to them, and that's much more difficult, and that's different ball game from something that is online. And another question about like some members have those records at home, and has student local college combination for no physical spaces to go return interns this year. Yeah, well, that's a very common problem for organizations, small organizations that don't have their local offices, that the records are in boxes at homes. So yeah, some good system has to be um, established, with the bulk of them, all the records transferred to local archives, because this way you can think of it as you have your own club record storage with secure facility with all the supports you have and so on. So you can think of your um, records in the archives as kind of like your own offsite storage. So very, very convenient, and the most important thing, they secure and searchable. Just a second, going. Over the years, our archives have traveled between members' homes, and the boxes have multiplied. 80 years will do that. Yeah.
Certainly will.
At the very least, inventory them. Who has what? That's at the very least, and advise people not to keep them in the basement. What is digital audit, and who does that type of audit? I believe in this case, digital audit would be a function of the digital preservation kind of strategy. And I think part of that is that check for the files for corruption and other issues on a regular basis. There are systems like that. You just run the system and just check all the files and identifying problems or issues with some of them based on some kind of like parameters. I think that's what we're talking about, the digital audit, just checking the files and the making sure like to identify issues if there are any. Then Aurora New Market has our files in home. We plan to donate to an archives after our 70 years celebration, when we'll showcase some of those old files. Yep, that's good, especially for anniversary. You might want to make it a project to mobilize everybody just in connection with it, like a big event, and get it done. Yeah, that's an excellent strategy.
All right. Looks like we made it to the bottom of the comments and questions. I'm just going to pass it over to Sheila, who's our chair of the communications committee, really quickly, and then we'll do a wrap up.
That would
Go
be
ahead,
co-chair along with Jamie.
Sorry.
Andrew, I want to thank you very much for an excellent presentation and also for giving us 2 or 3 areas where we can take this education for our archivists further. So it's been a very valuable session for us, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie?
All right. On that note, again, as co-chair, I guess, of the Communications Committee, thank you, Andrew, for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know there was tons of questions, and like I said earlier to you, I knew there was going to be a lot in the chat as well. So I do very much appreciate your time and coming here and chatting with our members. So thank you very much for everyone that asked. We will be posting this in tomorrow's newsletter, so you'll have the link to this as well. And then we'll get it up with all the other ones as well.
Yeah,
so you'll be able to have
fantastic.
access to
Well,
this.
yeah, thank you for having me. And if you have any follow-up questions from any of you, you can, my contact information is on the Galt Museum and Archives website. And just send me an email and we'll go from there.
Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
See you. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.